all the wonderful things that the Earth Charter does as an education document, as a framework in terms of ethics and law, one important aspect of it is its guidance. It provides for concepts of governance. Governance is a very wide word. We think of governments, but of course even in a family we have a situation of governance. So the Earth Charter gives us a number of ideas how to behave better or how to govern ourselves better in terms of ethics and fundamental principles. It also goes a little bit further. For example, the preamble of the Earth Charter refers to the Earth that we should consider to be a sacred trust relationship in terms of its beauty and bountiness and diversity. So sacred trust is an element. Now, people would normally not pay much attention to such a notion. Others perhaps will instinctively. They know the sacredness of the earth, but perhaps lawyers or governments need to be more mindful of what's actually behind such a notion of a sacred trust. Now, trust itself is a very common element in the way how the relationship between states and their citizens is organized. A state fundamentally operates as a trustee on behalf of the people that the state or the government is acting for. So in practical terms, that's expected from the government to be accountable to the people. And when it comes to transactions, if, for example, a country wants to privatize land use or energy and wants to perhaps cash in on its natural resources, what those governments really are doing is they are exercising or perhaps not exercising duties and responsibilities associated with their trusteeship arrangement they have with their citizens. And here in Rio in particular, one of the underlying big issues is how do we preserve what we call the global commons. Basically all aspects of the natural environment in some way or another are outside national jurisdiction, and they are called therefore the global commons, including oceans, Antarctica, biological diversity, but also think of the atmosphere. When you think of climate change, the atmosphere. At the moment the atmosphere has no legal status. It's assumed that it's just air and anybody can help themselves for free. Now you and I, we are not using much of the atmosphere, but corporates do, and we as car drivers would also do that. So we are actually using something that we may not have arguably an entitlement to. It becomes clearer when we perceive, say, the atmosphere as a global commons that requires a form of trusteeship arrangement. Some institution, ideally perhaps a World Climate Authority or a World Environmental Organization, would be in the position to actually act as a trustee on behalf of the atmosphere for the benefit of current and future generations, including non-human beings. At the moment it's not happening. In fact, there's a lot of political resistance against any kind of institutionalizing these trusteeship ideas. Now, a very common argument is to say, oh, well, it's against democracy. Who would be in charge and only states or governments could? Well, it's a bit simplistic. The reply to that is we can very clearly design a governance model for such a trusteeship organization that would consist of independent or also associated with the United Nations people or civil society members, even state delegates. So a whole spectrum of people could be actually running this big organization, and they would be accountable to everyone, including states. The big difference to the present situation would be that these new trustees, the organization would be accountable to somebody else, not to states, but to humanity at large. We have actually examples in existing organizations. United Nations has a United Nations Trusteeship Council, or has had one in the 1960s and 70s to help the transformation of former colonies to new independent states, and thereby having the role of speaking on behalf who legally cannot or could not speak for themselves. Once these ex-colonies become independent states, then they can speak for themselves. So the Trusteeship Council is a example, but it gets even more interesting when we look at organizations as the World Health Organization, which is clearly a trusteeship organization. Their loyalty is not to states or anything, purely to public health. You know, they want to control the spread of global diseases. Now, obviously, states have readily accepted a transfer of their sovereign rights, because what it means is that WHO is able to go into individual states and perhaps tell them what to do, monitor things. And an even more drastic example, one of the most powerful organizations that we have internationally is the World Trade Organization. And the World Trade Organization can take any country to court, or other way around, any country can sue another country. And they can't escape their responsibilities there. The reason is that the World Trade Organization and their panels and their decision-making bodies have only one raison d'etre, only one point of reference, and that is free trade, rather than loyalty to states or anything. So these examples illustrate one thing, and this is perhaps the lesson to be learned for Rio and beyond, that we do have the vehicles, we do have the ideas, we have even examples that would allow us to go another step now and be serious about a governance model that complements our current state-centered model. It's not a matter of abolishing states. It's not to say the end of states. Who knows, by the way, how long states will last? They're only about 300-400 years old, as we know them. But, you know, looking a little bit ahead, we need to think beyond current structures. And trusteeship models would complement, would advance a thinking within states and beyond states that we have a fundamental duty to care for this beautiful planet.